not Santa Fe smart to start at only 6 minutes after?
I didn't.
Wait another 6 minutes? Why don't we start? There's a quiet here, so. Thank you all for coming. This is our second panel, laser panel, for the Shimmer exhibition, which I hope that everyone has seen. If you haven't, I think it's open. So my name's Andrea Polli. I'm a professor of art and computer science at UNM and a member of SciArt Santa Fe. Our role here is to promote, SciArt Santa Fe promotes excellence in art science in that intersection that we call SciArt. A couple of ways we do that are by hosting a yearly statewide juried SciArt art exhibition, of which Shimmer is our 2026. And another way is by hosting these lasers. Lasers are Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. They were part of a consortium of organizations that host lasers all around the world. So we're very proud to be a part of that. We're doing these every Saturday here from 3 to 5 and until May 9th for our closing laser that will include, assuming the artists are up for it, and artist potluck. We briefly discussed it, but so we are so honored to be partnering with St. John's College, to be showing in this beautiful new gallery, and we are especially so thankful to the partnership of Chuck Tucker, who designed the gallery exhibition, a wonderful catalog, and is helping us manage all of these events. Thank you. I want applause. Thank you. Additional thank you to all our wonderful artists, generous support from UNM, New Mexico Arts, our volunteers, like the wonderful Susan Latham, and from individual donors like you who want to see art science thrive in our communities across the state. Many of you already donated to SciArt Santa Fe when you register for our events. We're so grateful for that. We really depend on that. And if you want to do more and are so inclined to the irrational, you can click on Support Art Science at our website, sciartsantafe.org, and buy us a piece of pie on Patreon for as little as $3.14 a month. Also, at our website, sciartsantafe.org, you can find out about our upcoming programs and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. I'm assuming most people are getting the monthly newsletter, but if not, go to sciartsantafe.org. There's a little line there where you can put in your email address. Before I introduce our speakers, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. And as we know, the land we are on has a very long history. Oge Poge, the original Tewa name for Santa Fe, which means white shell water place, is located on unceded territorial lands of the Tewa and Tanos people. We honor these people, past, present, and future, as well as the many other indigenous peoples who inhabited, held sacred, and stewarded this land. So I'm going to introduce all our panelists now, and then we'll go along in order. We won't take a break for Q&A. We'll do Q&A at the very end. So our wonderful panelists in order are Jessica Lanham, Dr. Joseph Galewsky, Lila Steffan, Sophie Azzolina, and then I'll close with a presentation of my work. So starting with Jessica. Artist Jessica Lanham's interactive water sculpture is based on the concept of turbidity. Viewers push down on the seesaw mechanism to activate turbid water, which you can do in the gallery containing sediment and ash, which then washes over a laser-etched map of the Gallinas, Mora, Sapello, and Pecos watersheds. UNM's Earth and Planetary Sciences Professor and Chair, Dr. Joseph Galewsky's research interests focus on the atmospheric branch of Earth's hydrologic cycle, its role in global climate dynamics, and its impact on Earth's geological history. Dr. Galewsky works with Lila Steffan. Artist Lila Steffan works primarily with found, repurposed, and hand-processed materials, including papers, textiles, and mineral-based paints, and her work benefits greatly from conversations and collaborations with geoscientists. Our fourth presenter, artist and St. John's College student Sophie Azzolina's artwork contains visual representations of real deep-sea wonders, along with imaginings of the mergings between human and ocean. And you know me, I'm going to talk about some stuff. I'll pass it on to Jessica.
Okay. Okay, you can hear me through the microphone here? Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Lanham, and as Andrea said, I'm one of the artists in the show here. And I'm an artist and a designer, and I'm going to share some of my work. And so, yeah, I'm an interdisciplinary artist. And as I was putting this show together, this talk together, I was thinking about Shimmer. And I realized that Shimmer is a thread in kind of all of my work, and has really been this thread in my work for a very long time. And I sort of see this manifesting in sort of three different ways, which is light and movement, slowing down and observing, and beauty. And I'm just going to play a video just to show this example, because I feel like video in many ways captures, kind of translates Shimmer in the best way in my work. And so, as I was saying, part of that is light and movement, and that light and movement, I think, sort of captures our attention and entices us to pause and watch. And then it kind of asks us to slow down and observe. And I was thinking about this with the Shimmer essay by Deborah Bird Rose. She writes, "Shimmer is an Aboriginal aesthetic that is a way to discuss things that appeal to the senses, things that evoke or capture feelings and responses, that both entice one's attention and offer rewards." And so I'm kind of thinking about this idea of enticing one's attention, and in many ways this is sort of similar to my concept of beauty. And so, and for me, beauty is really about seeing something kind of interesting and taking time to really examine the details and slow down and investigate. And I think, last week one of the panelists was talking about beauty and how they reach for an element of beauty in their work. And so I do this as well, and I think it's about sort of defining beauty on our own terms. And so during a studio critique, I was with a photographer and fellow MFA grad last year. Her name's Anna Roddy, and I was kind of questioning why I wanted beauty in my work, and she said, well, beauty asks us to slow down. And I sort of feel like that's kind of what I want in my work. And I felt like this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's a Potawatomi botanist and author, from the book Braiding Sweetgrass, kind of I think it nicely matches the essay in Shimmer, and as well as what I'm trying to capture. So I'll just read it really quickly. But she writes, "Beauty was an architecture of relationships, of connections that I yearned to understand. I wanted to see the shimmering threads that hold it all together, and I wanted to know why we love the world, why the most ordinary scrap of meadow can rock us back on our heels in awe. Beauty asks me for reciprocity, to be the complementary color, to make something beautiful in response." And so I'm kind of thinking about that, yeah, beauty asks me to pause and reflect, sort of creating intimacy with a place or object. And throughout my work, I encourage the practice of slowing down, wandering, and finding quiet moments for observation and reflection. So this is some footage from the burn scar from the Hermit's Peak Half Canyon fire up in Beaver Creek. And my work from the last 3 years, including the piece I have in this show and my MFA thesis, was all focused on the Hermit's Peak Half Canyon fires. And I spent about 3 years documenting the changes in the environment and the burn scar. And a lot of my documentation was just sitting and watching. And a lot of my documentation was just sort of sitting and watching, and I found myself drawn to these little aspen leaves sort of glinting among the burned ponderosas, these sort of little like pops of yellow and such. And so I'll just talk very quickly about the Hermit's Peak Half Canyon fire, because I know not a lot of you are very familiar with it. But as we know, it's the largest wildfires in New Mexico's recorded history. And there were also two merged but poorly managed prescribed burns that were set by the U.S. Forest Service and then fueled by climate change in years of colonial burn suppression. And so this is a picture of the burn scar here. And so you can kind of see Las Vegas is over here. And this is where I grew up. I grew up in just outside Las Vegas. And then here's Santa Fe for just kind of reference. And so I grew up on the campus of the United World College near the Montezuma Hot Springs. And the fire nearly swallowed my childhood home. And it also severely impacted the Gallinas River, which supplies drinking water to Las Vegas, and it's still pretty impacted by it. And I was living in California at the time, kind of watching everything unfold from afar. So one of the first things I did when I got back to New Mexico was just to drive up to see the burn scar. And it was my first time going up there. I went to this area known as Johnson's Mesa to see kind of what was left or bear witness to the fire. And I was really thinking about this idea of what's left, and I'm sort of really focused on the vistas of the burn scar, how far the fire reached. And when I got up there, I realized it's not about what's left or that things are gone, but that things have changed. And so details up close kind of tell more of the story about sort of the ecological processes underway. So I found some of these rocks on the side of the road that had this line, so where it's sort of charred on one side here, and then the other where it was exposed to the fire, and then on the other side, this part was under the ground, sort of in the dirt still, and so it's completely untouched. And so this sort of line becomes this kind of demarcation of the vent itself. And so the other thing is I'm noticing that there's this abundance of charcoal, and that everywhere that the fire is touched, it's left this residual charcoal, and it kind of acts as this constant visual reminder about the fire. One of the reasons I'm attracted to charcoal is it has this sparkly iridescent quality to it, and that's caused by the carbon residue and fragmented ash that forms during charring, which then scatters like fine particles. And it's this sort of refraction and diffraction of light and bending of light in the charcoal that I started really experimenting with. So much of the work I've made in the past couple of years has been made with wildfire charcoal. And I was also just thinking about how this charcoal also becomes kind of a version of shimmer, and it's sort of this sparkly substance that's spread across the burn scar. And so one of the pieces that I was working on that incorporated this charcoal is the piece I have in this show. And I made this in collaboration with Paige Tunby, who was getting her PhD in hydrology and water quality. This was for Shared Futures, which is an art and science collaborative program where they pair an artist and a scientist together. And we create an exhibition piece for Explora's Children's Museum in Albuquerque. And so Wildfires and Watersheds, Interwoven Futures is an interactive water sculpture that's based on the concept of turbidity. And so turbidity measures water clarity by shining light through it and recording how much light is scattered by suspended particulate matter. So literally a scientist just kind of shine a light through the water to examine how many particles there are. And so this is a graphic from some of Paige's data sets. So you can see kind of here's the burn scar, and you can see for reference how big it was in New Mexico. And then this is all the watersheds that it affected. And so these little green dots are these sensors that her team deployed. And so you can see up here, this is the Mora watershed, this is the Sapello River, this is the Gallinas here, and then this is the upper Pecos watershed, and all this flows down into the Rio Grande and then out to the Gulf of Mexico. And so I kind of fell in love with the scientific concept of turbidity. Like basically I just wanted to make some version of a snow globe because like what do you do with a snow globe? You shake it up and then you watch the particles settle. And so viewers push down on a seesaw mechanism to activate turbid water, which contains sediment ash, and then this washes over the map that I've laser etched. So you can see here's the burn scar, and then here are some of the watershed. It's the same as the graphic before. And I love kind of just watching viewers just sort of sit, like watching them just kind of play and watch the sediment. And so I like that it just sort of dances about the piece and then it settles. And so the sediment is wildfire ash as well as crushed semi-precious stones, such as moonstone, and some that are found in New Mexico like fluorite, garnet, or peridot. And I purposely chose semi-precious stones that were sparkly and reflective to kind of encourage people to sit and watch as the sediment moves about the piece. And something I've learned in grad school is that there's this sort of sitting and watching, or at least there's actually a name for it, or at least there's a cinematic version. And this is a genre called slow cinema. And slow cinema is a minimalist observational genre that uses long takes and sort of opens up space for the observation with an emphasis on extended duration and sparse narrative elements. And I learned about slow cinema from Stephanie Lamb in her essay, It's About Time. And so she says, one of the challenges of environmental thought and environmental advocacy is the ability to communicate and represent timescales that are outside human perception. And so one of the art forms that can address this and grapple with this is slow cinema, because it's a time-based media, such as film and video, and it can open up cinematic virtual spaces for observation. And so this kind of becomes a visual strategy that encourages an attentive mode of observation and the development of an ecologically oriented gaze. And so I took this video in the Bosque, in the Rio Grande, and it's one of my favorite spots in the Bosque. It's where one of the diverted acequias rejoins the Rio. And so the muddy water here up at the top is the Rio, and then this clear water at the bottom is the acequia joining it. And partly what's so mesmerizing is that, again, is this sort of shimmer in the water. And it also makes me think of Alice's piece, and she spoke last week. But, you know, and it's kind of in that we're sort of drawn to the same thing. But one of the things I loved about this is I find people at this spot all the time, they're just sitting and watching. They'll be biking or walk with their bikes, and then they'll stop and just sit and watch this spot. And, you know, and it's like, and then sometimes they'll stay for like 10 minutes. And and there's often ducks who like hang out at the little demarcation line eating tasty snacks. But I realize like it's kind of a perfect example of this slow cinema. So I'll just kind of finish off with some photo and quick video of my show from last year, which was called Found in the Overflow. And this was a site-specific show installed outside Las Vegas on the campus of the United World College at the Dwan Light Sanctuary. And so, funny side note, I was in Andrea's grant writing class last year, and this was the proposal that I worked on, so it worked. One of my favorite ways is to work is in an installation-based format. So this was a show of projection-mapped pieces that were all of compiled videos from my documentation from the burn scar that were then projected over surfaces made with wildfire charcoal. And in this show, I really started leaning into the genre of slow cinema. And, I just want to kind of take note of, the benches here. Sorry, pause went here. But there's these benches that are in the Light Sanctuary. And they really encouraged people to kind of just sit down and take in the show from afar. And so this is one of the pieces up close that I'll share in a video in a second, but this is about an 8-foot painting that was painted with charcoal and watercolor, and then objects that I pulled from culverts were placed on top. And then this is a silk piece. It's actually transparent that was then molded over burned tree stumps, and that contains wildfire charcoal as well. So let me just pull up the video. And so, I'm choosing a lot of videos with movement and with water because I feel like it brings life to all the pieces. And there's a lot of footage that has new growth. So I'm projecting all this new growth over the residual charcoal. And one thing that I was really happy about, as I would say, was people would just sometimes sit on the benches and watch from afar. And I realized this sort of sitting and watching was a lot of what my experience was with documenting the places that I went to in the burn scar. And so I would try to pay attention to a lot of like little details up close with the projector. So you'll see this little leaf kind of dances across the rock here, and then it'll flow off and go across the painting. But I think, one of the things that I really loved is when I would go and sit with folks is they would just tell me about their interpretation of the show and what was sort of their experience. And that was kind of one of my favorite experiences, was hearing how other people experienced the work. And so here's the silk again, that shows some of the charcoal that's kind of embedded in it. And then the next piece here is called Fragments. And Fragments was really about, it's these video pieces, and it's about these pieces that are falling apart and then coming together. So these are 3 separate videos that are then come together as one. And so again, the surface is wildfire ash that's pulverized and then affixed to medical gauze. That's what that material in the background is. But now you'll kind of see all the video kind of comes together. And I was thinking a lot about how fragments are sort of the experience that a lot of people were having, and how I was hearing people talk about the fire and their different experiences, and how when I would hear these stories and they would all kind of come together and sort of be part of this bigger experience of how people experience the fire and our sense of home and community. So I'll just move this forward a tiny bit. Let this keep playing. And yeah, and I'll just kind of end by saying, you know, one of my favorite conversations was I was talking with a friend, and she was saying, you know, I really don't know how to talk about art or how I'm supposed to be experiencing this. And I said, no, however you see the work and experience is exactly what I want. And I'm sort of not expecting anyone to come to my work with preconceived notions. And so however they experience the work and how they take it in is how I want them to experience it. And sort of to tie it all back, I think in many ways, this is what Shimmer is. It's sort of seeing these connections and observing them and then kind of making your own experience of it. And I will end there. Thank you.
I'm going to switch over to, okay.
Great. Is the microphone working? I think so.
I think you need to be a little maybe
Okay.
closer.
Yes.
Yeah.
How's that now? I can also speak in a loud, booming voice. So this is great. Thank you. My name is Joe Galewsky. I'm a climate scientist at the University of New Mexico, and I'm also the chair of the department. And I also, my connection with kind of science and art comes maybe from a couple of different directions. When I was a kid, my mom got her MFA in ceramic sculpture, so I grew up around art studios, and actually, I was telling folks before this that I feel in many ways more comfortable around artists than I do around scientists. When I was in graduate school at the University of California, Santa Cruz, my research focused on mountain building processes, how mountains grow, and during that time I got very interested in Zen Buddhism and started practicing at the Santa Cruz Zen Center, which is associated with the San Francisco Zen Center lineage. And one of the founding teachers, the founding teacher of Japanese Soto Zen Buddhism is Dogen Zenji, who some of you are probably familiar with if you've ever been to Upaya Zen Center here in Santa Fe. And Dogen's words, written in the 13th century, really echo a lot of how I have experienced my research into the Earth system. The way he describes the interdependence of systems that we normally view as separate, as well as kind of the radical subjectivity that we actually take for granted in our day-to-day experience. This photograph is a picture that I took in 2010. It's of a site called the Shaknantor Plateau in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile. It's one of the driest places on Earth, even drier than New Mexico by a long shot, actually. And tucked back behind that mountain is the Atacama Large Millimeter Array Observatory. It's an astronomical observatory that studies all kinds of phenomena throughout the universe. It's also where the cosmic background radiation was first measured. And we were there measuring small variations in the chemistry of atmospheric water vapor. For those who are familiar with such things, it's studying stable isotopes in water vapor. And those variations tell us about how water is processed through the atmosphere. And this site was especially interesting because it's so dry. The water vapor that we're measuring has actually been processed through the very uppermost parts of the Earth's atmosphere, and it's basically the only place on Earth where you can, on the surface, sample water vapor that's been processed through the uppermost atmosphere. One of the things that has illuminated my research over the decades is this interdependence between different aspects of the Earth system that are typically viewed as separate. Typically you have geologists studying mountains, hydrologists study water. They may talk to each other, but often they don't. And this is a long excerpt from Dogen's Mountains and Waters Sutra, which I really recommend. It's a piece that I've been studying for 35 years. And in this, he really describes this remarkable subjectivity, and I will read this at least a bit. He says, all beings do not see mountains and waters in the same way. Some beings see water as a jeweled ornament, but they do not regard jeweled ornaments as water. What in the human realm corresponds to their water? We only see their jeweled ornaments as water. Some beings see water as wondrous blossoms, but they do not use blossoms as water. Hungry ghosts see water as raging fire or pus and blood. I especially like that line. Dragons see water as a palace or a pavilion. Some beings see water as the seven treasures or a wish-granting jewel. Some see it as a forest or a wall. Some see it as the dharma nature of pure liberation. The true human body, or as the form of body and essence of mind. Human beings see water as water. What the heck does that mean? I have come to recognize that that's actually talking about how we have very clear ideas about all the things around us, right? We all have lots of ideas. We know this is a water bottle. We know what water does for us. And what Dogen is pointing to is this idea that at a minimum, can we let go of our ideas about what anything is? When you sit in meditation for a long time, you can start to see how you construct your own reality. And the idea here that he's pointing at is we view water as this thing that you drink and maybe wash things with. Fish maybe view water as a jeweled palace. And for them, what they think of as water may be something that's very different than what we think of as water. Do I think that's literally true? I don't know. But it's a really interesting invitation to kind of get past our preconceived boundaries that we put on things. And I think as a scientist, that has helped me to look beyond these traditional disciplinary boundaries. And to the extent I've had any successes as a scientist, it has been from working across boundaries. If you go to the next slide.
Oops. Sorry.
This is another image that I took. This is from the Mauna Loa Observatory on the Big Island of Hawaii. This is where scientists have been making carbon dioxide measurements since the early 1960s. It's where we really first recognized that carbon dioxide concentrations are increasing as a result of burning of fossil fuels. So it's a very historic site, and we were doing similar kinds of measurements of these water vapor, differences in water vapor chemistry. It's a very different setting here, obviously, and I love that picture. You can really see, the clouds, and there's part of the mountain sticking out. And one of the themes of my research has been how mountains, so in Japanese and Chinese Buddhist iconography, mountains and rivers are a very common theme. You see this in the paintings and the poetry, and even this, the Mountains and Water Sutra. And one of the things that science has recognized over the last few decades is that mountains and rivers literally do co-create each other. That's actually literally true, that you can't have mountains on Earth without water through orographic precipitation. In order for it to rain in mountainous locations, that the precipitation depends on the presence of topography. And this is another quote by Dogen from the Mountains and Water Sutra, saying, when most human beings see water, they only see that it flows unceasingly. This is a limited human view. There are actually many kinds of flowing. Water flows on the earth, in the sky, upward and downward. It can flow around a single curve or into bottomless abysses. When it rises, it becomes clouds. When it descends, it forms abysses. That's actually true. It's also very poetic and very beautiful. So I really love being able to talk to artists, and I'm really grateful to see that there is a positive interaction between artists and scientists. That you could imagine a venue where maybe the artists and scientists would be arguing, but I think there's actually a lot of ways for artists and scientists to talk to each other and to work with each other. I think it's good for scientists to maybe back away from such rigid thinking, where we think we know things and think we know the boundaries of things, and actually step back. In Buddhism, it's called taking the backward step and turning the light within. But taking a step back and being open to the possibility that the boundaries that we think we understand may be a lot more tenuous, and they may not even exist at all. And I think that can lead to better science. It can probably lead to better environmental outcomes. And I think that artists and scientists in dialogue in that way can have a lot to do together. So I could keep talking, but I think that's good for now. Maybe we can talk a little bit afterwards. Thanks.
All right. Hi. Can everyone hear me all right? Great. I'm Lila Steffan. I am a painter and paper maker. I am also working with Joe down at the University of New Mexico, where I'm a graduate student. So I work primarily with mineral pigments, so rocks and clays that I grind up into colorful powders. I also work quite a bit with handmade papers. And there are three main ways that I see water flowing through my art practice in the same kind of sense that Joe has discussed water flowing through the world. And the first of these three ways, if you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, there should be one in between there. Back.
Okay.
Apologies.
Are you missing one?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing one. My apologies. So the first way that I see water flowing through my work is in the actual paints that I make, right? So water is what it takes to activate a watercolor paint. It's what it takes to activate the pigments that I work with. Here you can see several pigments at varying stages of ground upness. And in the next slide, you can see a couple of the places where I have sourced some of the waters that I'll be talking about that I work with. If you go to the next slide as well. In this piece, you can see how, sorry, I'm a little bit of a nervous speaker. In this piece, you can really see how water interacts with pigments in a range of ways, because this piece is one of the few that I have created where I did not fully mix the paints beforehand. Instead, I created a very highly concentrated charcoal-based paint made actually with charcoal from the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burn scar, which Jess was just talking about. And so there's just enough water in that paint to allow it to drip, right? And so each one of these little swatches that you see here has 3 drops of that highly concentrated charcoal pigment, and then 7 drops of water on top of that, just water, from either Beaver Creek, which Jess also talked about, which is in a highly burned section of the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burn scar, or the Pecos River from a section that was not highly affected. And I gathered this water through a course in the Earth and Planetary Sciences program at the University of New Mexico. As you can see in this piece, when I drop the water onto the pigments, they can behave in a really wide range of ways. That encounter between them leads to all kinds of unexpected relationships and ways of moving. So in some of these, you can see that the charcoal has dispersed very much into the water and created more of a gray tone that spreads around. In others, the charcoal does not disperse very much at all and stays fairly concentrated in a single black dot in the center. And in most of them, it's somewhere in between, right? So in a lot of them, you'll see that the water spreads out, it makes a certain shape, and the charcoal gets pretty concentrated right at the rim of that shape and leaves a little bit of a ring. If you don't mind going to the next slide. The second really significant way that I see water flowing through my art practice is through the process of paper making. And when you look at a piece of paper, you might be thinking, water? Because it's pretty dry, it's pretty solid. But if you've ever made paper, you know that the paper making process is really sloppy and really watery. Most of the time when I'm making paper, I am elbow deep in a vat that is about the size of a bathtub, and it's full of this slurry that's made up of paper pulp, which is a combination of blended up recycled paper, textiles, and plant matter, and then a whole bunch of water. And so by the time I'm done pulling sheets of paper, I'm all pruny. I've been spending lots of time in the water. And it's really water that makes the paper paper as well, because in order to create that sheet of paper, what I'm actually doing is taking a fine mesh screen, sifting it through there, and then letting all the water pour out, and then pressing it and drying it for several days. And so it's actually the fact that the water was there and has now left that even allows that paper to bond together and become paper at all. Don't mind moving to the next slide. You can also, the final way that I see water flowing through my practice is in the actual imagery. So in some of the pieces that you see in the show here or in my studio, you might notice things that are reminiscent of rivers, raindrops, snow, pools, springs bubbling up, all of those sorts of images tend to make their way into my work. I'm going to go to the next slide. And this piece gives an example of a little bit of a more direct kind of imagery of water in my work. In this one, I am actually letting the water decide how the image is being created and where I am going with how I treat that surface. So this piece is also related to the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon burn scar. This is a piece of scrap canvas that I brought to Beaver Creek and left there for about 2 weeks under a stone. And when I returned, there had been a lot of change because Beaver Creek has a lot of sediment in there right now. And always. And so there were soils, leaf litter, and of course, charcoal from the burn scar with that beautiful shimmer that Jess was talking about that had gotten caught in all of the fibers of that piece of scrap canvas, and particularly in relationship to where the stone had been sitting in the center, keeping the canvas pinned down and under the water. And as the flow of the water had gone around the stone, it had left charcoal deposited in different areas. And so when I returned to this piece, I let those marks guide where I would cut up the piece and where I would quilt it back together, working with the location that the stone had been to determine where that kind of nexus would be, where those pieces might meet one another. And I also worked with the charcoal sediments and other bits of soils and everything that had gotten all caught in the canvas and sort of traced over them with paints that I had made out of the charcoals and stones that I found in the area, working with the marks that had already been made there as a guide for where I would go. So as you go into the show here, you will see a few works of mine that capture kind of all three of these ways that water flows through my practice. So all of the pieces that are in the show here include handmade paints made from minerals, charcoals, indigos, water. They contain handmade paper. They're all painted on the surfaces of handmade papers, which only exist because of water. And in each of them, I think you might be able to find things that hint at water, hint at clouds, hint at pools, whatever you may see in them. And in all of these cases, water as pigment activator, water as paper maker, and water as visual symbol in a work of art is water that's activating the work. It's water that is bringing the shimmer of life into the pieces, because none of this could exist without that. Watercolors, papers, the imagery, all of it is activated and enlivened by water and by these different types. Thank you.
Hello, okay. So this will be a lot more informal than the beautiful professional artists here, because I don't really know what I'm doing, as you can tell by me putting a big picture of my face on the opening screen. But that's me, and I'm a student at St. John's College, which is that picture right there. And now we can get rid of this slide. Okay, so I don't have a professional background, so I'm just gonna go into my personal background. I grew up on Sadia Island, which is about 30 minutes away from the capital of the United Arab Emirates, and about an hour away from Dubai. But what that meant was that I got to spend all my weekends at the beach with my mom and my sister. And I think that's where my love for the beach really started. I mean, it's just the Persian Gulf. The oceans there are so pristine, but they're also like changing every day. So every weekend we would go out, it would be a different beach. Like some days they'd be covered with seaweed everywhere. Other days the waves would be like past my 6-year-old height's head. It would always be changing. And so I think that's where I kind of base a lot of my art, is on the beauty that I see in the ocean that I grew up with. And I'm glad that my fellow panelists talk about the water because I'm about to do the same thing, and how I see Shimmer there. But yeah, we can go to the next one, more pictures of the ocean that I took, and actually none of these are from the UAE. They're all from different places, but I love to go to the beach because I live in Denver now, so I don't really have the opportunity. So when I do, it feels like breaching a sort of like interaction with nature that seems even more distant than land animals to me. Like it seems like there's a layer of inaccessibility that I don't see with the squirrels that are in my backyard. And I think that's why I love it so much. I mean, I have a very specific core memory of me being at the beach on Saadiyat, and I pick up this beautiful shell, and it's a beautiful conch shell, about the size of my head, and I'm holding it, and it has these pinks and blues, and I'm so excited because I'm like a child finding like candy, and I'm showing my sister, I'm showing my mom. And then I feel something on the side of my hand, and I turn the shell over, and it's a massive hermit crab, like gripping onto my hand. And I think I let out the loudest scream you could imagine. People thought it was the lifeguard, like, and I shook it off. But that's the sort of interaction I think I experience with the ocean that I don't necessarily when I'm camping or with other animals. So I'm really enchanted by the ocean. So we can move to the next one. Some of my artwork, I guess these are not ocean animals at all, except for that middle one. But I think I am really drawn into representations of animals, especially in artwork. I guess the only other artistic experience I've had was like my AP visual arts class in high school, where I did a thesis on representing different sins through animals, which I went to a Catholic school, so that was not the best choice grade-wise, but I really love something about the connection between human and animal that I don't think you can get with inanimate objects. Like maybe there is something about the animal, about the human that's really animal to me that I really like to represent in artwork, like something like an owl that represents like some sort of piece to me that is so embodied in a way that I can only be sometimes. Like it feels like it can bring me outside of a very like contained or maybe like detached human. I mean, I'm always on my phone, and it feels like animals are just the opposite of that. So I love to see how they interact like that, which I think goes to the theme of Shimmer as well, like interacting, not being a part of the biome where animals live, but being able to represent them and still appreciate them somehow. Yeah. Okay, so then this is my art, the next slide is my artwork that's in the show, where I decided to kind of focus on the deep sea, which I mean, I talked about that inaccessibility I feel about nature, and especially in the ocean, and I think the deep sea is probably the most inaccessible place I could think of, but I really liked thinking about how dark it is down there until some sort of human interaction is able to go down there, whether that's through submarines or technology, and then as soon as this flashlight is peering through the void, you see like an oarfish swim by, and it's like iridescent, and it's shimmering, and it's not something that, if that technology was down there, like the submarine shining the light, that would ever be seen. Like its colors, its shimmer doesn't really matter to the animals who are down there, but it does seem really beautiful to us. So I tried to represent that sort of feeling in my art. Well, maybe the shell one is reminiscent of that story I told about the hermit crab. But so I have this, which I'm also really interested in that dreamlike sort of biome that I feel like the ocean has, especially that deep, far away from any sort of human touch. And how the human interacts with that. And the whale fall one, so these huge whales that take such an important and a lot of room up in the ocean, once they die, they fall to the ocean floor and provide a lot of food for different animals that are there, like these sea lilies that eat the flesh, and they also work on old shipwrecks, but just that intermingling is happening without anyone ever seeing it. But that seems so beautiful to me that it's so untouched by anything like that. And then those are some giant tube worms, which look a lot different how in the actual gallery. They kind of, but it's just things that exist in so much color that obviously isn't obvious to us at all, like unless you're in a submarine able to withstand that pressure. So yeah, the shimmer that lies below the surface of human interaction, I was really interested in that. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay. I am last here. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I can't say enough of how inspired I am by these panelists. Thank you all so much. It's really amazing. I'm going to talk about some of my work related to light and air. I love this quote by David Abrams in Becoming Animal. The atmosphere, the translucent medium of exchange between the breathing bodies of any locale is subtly different in each terrain. And these ideas about air and the specificity of air, and thinking about, I love what Joe was saying about the clouds being the movement of water, is something that is really inspiring to my work. My background is in doing a lot of public artwork that visualize different types of real-time data related to environment and climate. This work is visualizing particulate pollution. I went to Antarctica to work alongside some scientists like these three wonderful geographers at Lake Hoare in the Dry Valleys. I produced an audio CD called Sonic Antarctica with soundscape recordings and interviews with scientists, as well as sonifications of data that was collected there, and did a book with Jane Marshing, a collection of essays about how in Antarctica, in both the poles, digital culture, climate change, and the poles, and how the tools of scientists are converging with the tools of artists. And I did I covered a bridge with interactive light, and that was wind powered, and helped to raise awareness of the potential for wind power. This was in Pittsburgh in 2007, 2008. I did a book related to about that piece, a monograph called Hack the Grid. And this is my work, my contribution to this exhibition. It's really kind of two series. One, the larger pieces are part of a series that I would call The Lake, and the smaller pieces are really maquettes for larger pieces that I call The Ledger. And these works are lenticular, so they're lenses that cause the work to change and move, and for you to be able to see an illusion of different layers and light as you move across the work. And it was inspired by a public artwork that I completed last year called Three Worlds at the Eccles School of Business at the University of Utah. And in this piece, since it was a school of business, and when I was exploring Salt Lake, I would fly in to the Delta Hub in Salt Lake City, and the biggest kind of landmark as you were flying in is, of course, this amazing lake. And I was struck by not only the shape of the lake, but the way the lake didn't really seem to exist as much as it reflected the sky above it. And so I was thinking about the ecology, the ties between the ecologies and the economies, of course, being commissioned to do something for a business school. So I wanted to create a work that connected ecology and economies in some way, and that became this Piece 3 Worlds. So in this Piece 3 Worlds, you see images of the lake, images of the dry bed of the lake at times. The lake's shape that you see here is very different at different times. And in other layers, there are images of kind of economic graphs actually throughout history. So spreadsheets and handwritten ledgers and things like that you can see in this piece. And actually I can play, so you can see in this work in progress video just how luminous these are light boxes, but even without being light boxes and being the reflected light of the pieces in the show here, this lenticular technology is so beautiful and luminous. So I was excited to include these in the show. This just shows you a digital representation of some of the depth of those pieces and some of the graphs and different shapes. So as I was thinking about this work relative to Deborah Bird Rose's work, I came upon, I was really attracted to what also Alice talked about last week, which was the iridescence. So iridescence is a mode in which one performs patterns and takes them apart again, both departure and return. As we withdraw and make separate, so too we return and interpenetrate. We embody and perform life's desire, reiterating it again and again, and in so doing, honoring and participating in the ripples and waves of life's gleaming, motion-filled coming forth. And now when Deborah Bird Rose talks about iridescence, she's not only talking about the visual fluctuation between figure and ground, right, that Alice talked about, but she's also talking about figure and ground and sound. And I do a lot of work in sound, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about some of my work in sound, especially in the context of this panel. So I've been looking a lot and working with a lot with these visual representations of sound. They're called sound spectrograms. And so this is a spectrogram of bells, and the bells have harmonics. So what you see these horizontal bands. Those are frequencies that are different harmonic frequencies. Well, when you see discrete bands, that's what you're seeing. But then when you see these kind of waves here, those are the bird sounds that you heard in the background of those harmonic bells. And so I'm very interested in how shapes of how sound can make a shape and might be translated into a visual form or a visual shape. So I've mapped these spectrograms onto 3D forms and made animations, which maybe some of you have seen these before. Kind of mapping the sound as if it was dough. The bells that you hear are from a church in Portugal. I was in a residency in Portugal a couple years ago, did a lot of recordings. And there's a ritual that happens every year in certain churches in Portugal where people throw bread rolls out of the towers, and they represent promises. They're called promessas, and they're promises for the year. So I kind of looked at those two kind of things as a metaphor. So I've been doing a lot of these kinds of, and I 3D printed some still shapes and turned these into ceramic bread bowls and cooked bread in them as part of the Promesas project. Here's a view, this was a show in Madrid, and it's a view of the white rubber 3D prints that came also from stills from the animation. So I'm really interested in how these forms can then kind of be frozen into solid forms. I work a lot with glass blowing, so I made some forms and blew them into glass shapes, and this was at the UNM Art Museum. And then in this case, the blown glass form, I collaborated with a bioscientist who grew algae inside of the forms, and that's a grow light there. And this I just completed another blown glass piece, which is at the Santa Fe Community College Dean's Gallery now. If you get a chance to see it, it's going to be up for a few weeks. And this piece, I integrated the blown glass with foam glass that I've been working on for quite a while. So I've developed a formula to kind of infuse air into glass, which I'm so excited about and so kind of in love with. I'm really in love with glass and the beauty of glass, whether it's sparkling and shining and shimmering, or whether it's kind of bubbling and filled with air. It's just really exciting to me, and integrating it with ceramics. And in another part of my work, I work with bioart, so I work with biological materials, and this is some biofoam pieces that I developed in a residency in Japan last summer. And the same biofoam recipe was very interesting to combine with shushikabe, which is a living spackle, basically, that's very traditional in Japanese architecture. So it's a mud that contains groups of bacteria. It's actually been sequenced into like 16 or 20 different kinds of bacteria inside of this mud material. So I actually mixed this shushikabe with the biofoam that I was creating. I was creating a plant-based biofoam, so I was using agar, which in Japan they call kanten. And I found this incredible, when the foamy stuff that you see here, this is wet and newly created with turmeric and other natural materials to create color. When the foamy stuff, especially when it was combined with shushikabe, dries, it is very stable, and it creates this beautiful like metallic color, which it was just so exciting to me in terms of the experimentation with materials. So just to end, while I was in Japan, I recorded at some of the Buddhist temples. I was in Nara, the birthplace of Buddhism in Japan. And so I took these spectrograms of chanting, and I kind of spun them, and I created these 3D forms, and I realized that they were very much like stupas. I looked at the harmonics, and the harmonics that are created by Buddhist chanting are even more complex than what is created by bells. And I became really interested in this. This is just the very beginnings of research. I totally want to pick Joe's brain on some of this stuff. But I looked at different frequencies in relationship to different chakras, and just thinking about these connections. This is the sound that you see these are the chants that you see this spectrogram from. So I started to create these three-dimensional forms. And I just finished this video, which I will play, which is a few minutes if I have it.
And I'll end there. Thank you for indulging me. Okay, so we can take questions from the audience, or I can ask questions of people. Oh, yes.
Shaoshugiban. You know the term?
No.
It's the charcoal.
Oh,
Oh, thank you. I've been exploring this, trying to do this myself. Oh, is it not on? Hello?
yeah, yeah.
Shaoshugiban. Japanese for
Oh, the,
where they take wood and they put it in a fire, and one surface becomes charcoal. And they use that because the charcoal surface becomes impervious to weather, and it weather's great. They do siding with it and everything, but it's gorgeous too. And they also incorporate it. Have you heard?
Well, I actually have an interesting story that connects to that, in that there's a couple who lost their home in the Hermit's Peak Half Canyon fire. They're the owners of the Samia's health food store, if you ever got to Las Vegas. But they built their home from scratch, and they lost it in the fire. But so they actually just rebuilt their home, and they're using that technique to finish the outside. And they rebuilt it in the burn scar on the original land. So it's kind of this, like, I don't know. It's just there's some kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but connection to the fire that took their previous home and the new one they built. But they're using that technique.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's beautiful too. Yeah. And you.
I think when we talked about shimmer as a theme, we never thought that charcoal from the burn scar was going to be something that becomes part of it, yeah.
What was the material that you put the sound waves through to create that kinetic sculpture?
That was totally virtual computer.
Okay.
So what it was formed the hydrogen. It was just
Just experimentation at this point and looking at, stupas.
Yeah, I was curious about, like you say, determining
Yeah.
the load, I guess, as well. But
Yeah, it's, that is something that I'm still kind of figuring out, yeah, for sure.
Kind of reminds me of Shoddy patterns.
of course.
They was Shoddy patterns.
No, can we get a mic?
Shoddy, he took sand, and I've actually done this in physics labs. You took sand and you put it over a vibrating surface, and as you put different sounds through, you get different frequencies, and the sand will take on different patterns. And he has a whole book of patterns where he experiments with various substances on plates, and he moves in certain ways, vibrates in certain ways. And yours looked like a very fancy, elegant, Schlotty pattern, way
Nice.
beyond what he ever got.
Nice, thanks. Susan. Susan, do you want to ask a question?
There's something, am I speaking all right through this? Okay, I hardly ever do this. But this phrase absolutely captivates me, the shape of sound. I'm just like so excited about it. Now, I went to a big deal conference on cymatics, so I'm not totally a beginner, but when I saw, well, it looks like glass, and then the shape, was I reading that right? It was glass?
Yeah, glass or water, yeah. It's all virtually created through the computer. So you're creating different kinds of reflections and transmission of light in a virtual space. And because it's moving, I think it brings up water, but also maybe molten glass, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Well, now I'm seeing a pair. I do metal sculpture, and I love what the sunlight does to it. How the sun plays on the metal. And so I have a whole series of photographs that are the shape of light. So now I'm seeing the shape of sound, and I'm very excited. I don't know where it's going to go, but thank you. Thank you.
And Susan has a wonderful sculpture in the show. People should definitely check it out.
Excuse me?
You have a wonderful sculpture in the exhibition.
Yes, and I would say that that sculpture in my own home has been backlit just by the windows, you know, no big deal. But I think that the movement and the interaction of the shape of the metal really gets very activated with sunlight. So sunlight and sound, what a team, huh? Anyway, thanks, I'm very excited about it. I don't know where it's going, but thank you.
Oh, we have another question.
Thank you for bringing this, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Very good talks, everyone. That was really a joy to get to watch. This is a question for everyone on the panel. I'm a scientist myself, and I wonder, you know, sometimes accuracy gets in the way of actually communicating things, and it seems with a lot of these pieces, you know, you've managed to capture the essence of what you're trying to talk about without really getting bogged down in that you know, pedantic kind of way of doing science. And I was wondering if you all could just kind of talk about that. Like, do you think about that when you make these pieces? Like, how do you navigate those kinds of questions with this like intersection of these very different but also similar disciplines?
Sure, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to go through. Hi. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, especially after I did that collaboration with Paige Tunby, and that it's one of the tricky things I think sometimes when artists and scientists collaborate is like the science can almost take precedent and like the art becomes just the vehicle for translating at this. And Alice talked about this in her talk last week as well. And art almost becomes secondary. And I work as a designer, so sometimes I don't mind that way of working because I'm just trying to translate an idea. But with art, I feel like, you know, science is trying to be very accurate, very precise, and trying to tell you something very specific usually. Whereas art, for me, or at least I think of good art, is more about asking questions and kind of, you know, not, as I was saying in my talk earlier, not being didactic, not telling you what to see, not saying this is what you're supposed to be getting out of this. It's just kind of seeing it for what it is and you kind of having your own curiosities and coming away more from questions. Kind of just what you were just talking about after seeing the sounds, vibrations, and the light, you came away with questions more rather than sort of exactly what you're trying to see.
I was just going to add to that. Oh, sorry. I was just going to add to that. I think to be a good scientist as well, you need to ask. That curiosity, that questioning is just so important for anything.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you, young man. Matt just finished his master's degree working with me at UNM. Did a great job. So I think even in science, I can say that there's a point of intuition when you know that a set of physical relations is true, and often the statistical work you have to do to kind of formally demonstrate it to pass peer review, it can be an enormous amount of work, but it's ultimately, the way I've heard it described from my own mentors was that your statistical tests should still be showing you what you know. Like if you do a statistical test or if you're looking at some effect that is only detectable with some very subtle statistical mechanism, that's not a great result. And at its best, the statistical tests, the accuracy, should be kind of confirming what we see intuitively in a figure. And I think there's actually some link there with art as well, just in terms of like an initial intuition about the world, and then you have to embody it some way. And because we live in a society, we have different ways of communicating in our different fields. But I think I can say for myself that the statistical analysis, or what you're describing, is not something that's gotten in the way. It's sort of like the finishing touch you have to put on it. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love for Lila to respond to this, and then I would also like to respond to this young man's question.
Yeah, thank you. I had something along those lines come up with the piece that I showed with the little swatches of the charcoal and the water drops. When I started that piece, my original intention was to see if there was any kind of correlation between the way that the charcoal interacted with the water from the burned creek, Beaver Creek, and from the Pecos in the area where it was not burned. And as I was going through this process, I ended up finding that, right, I'm not a scientist, I don't have very strict controls, and the little bit of shake in my hand when I'm working the water dropper, or the humidity difference or temperature difference in my studio, it's probably all gonna be playing into those reticulation patterns as much, if not more, than which water I'm working with. And so I created all of these little swatches thinking like, oh, I'm gonna see differences between these creeks maybe. And as it turned out, they created questions instead. As everyone has been mentioning, they instead created this sense of what is causing all of these differences. And I'm not sure, but all of that time spent working with that, it made me feel much more curious about the waterways than I came in with, and much more curious about the charcoal, even though I still don't know whether the heavy metals in the waters are at all related to the patterns in these little swatches.
Sophie, as a student who's studying, I know there's a lot of science in your studies here. Do you have a thought about that?
Okay, the way I understood the question, is it more about like trying to describe the art? Because I honestly, I'm not as scientifically inclined as some of the people here. And I'm not taking lab this year. Yeah, precision. That's a good. Does that work? I can answer that. Yeah, I really hate explaining my art or describing it. I hate showing it to like my mom because she's always asking so many questions about it, and I think when I'm making art, I don't know what I'm doing at all. Like it doesn't really, like I feel like I have an idea in my head, and then other than that, I can't focus on particulars, or it ends up being a piece that I really don't like. And I'm not sure what sort of area that is. It seems to me like I'm always in this unsatisfying gap between the words I'm using and the meaning I'm trying to convey. And I feel like when I make my art, I'm like stuck in this gap where I can't find any words to describe the feeling I have when I'm creating the art, or what the art ends up being itself. So yeah, a really muddled answer to your question.
Yeah, well, it just seems like that's a process of thinking and learning. Like you and the paper and your marking materials are part of that process of learning and thinking that isn't verbal. So I think that's really, you're in a different space. That's what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to say that, when I was in Antarctica I was there for about 7 weeks working alongside scientists, and one thing I found was that, just maybe to respond to your thought, there were scientists that were studying a lot of things and a lot of things they were seeing had really alarming consequences for climate change. This was back in 2007, 2008. And I did a lot of interviews. I interviewed scientists a lot, recorded those and transcribed those. And in that process, I really learned how limited the scientists were in terms of speaking the feelings and the kind of maybe conclusions, but not provable conclusions that they were coming to from their research that were very concerning to them. And they felt really, some of them said to me that they felt really appreciative that myself as an artist could even publish their words, because I was publishing in different kinds of publications. You know, they could say things that they couldn't really say in the official formal science publications. So that was just kind of, I know it's taking your question in a different direction, but that, I think that's something important to say. Then I take this image and I map it on, I spin it just in Photoshop, and then I map it onto a virtual three-dimensional shape. So where it's dark, it's kind of higher, and where it's lighter, it's lower. And that's what the mapping algorithm does. Yeah.
It's beautiful, thank you.
Thanks. Do panelists have any questions for each other before we close?
I have a question. How do you guys think about audience in your work? And maybe I won't even expand the question and just leave it at that.
Do you want to go first? You can go first.
Okay. Jess is the going first panelist.
Thank you, Jess. I like to get it out of the way so my nerves don't get the better of me. For me, it's really important to have, for my audience to kind of be anybody, like kids, you know, and particularly folks who don't have a background in art. Because I think sometimes I feel bummed because I feel like a lot of art shows and art only gets seen by people who are like interested in art, you know, or like have a sort of background, because that's how galleries are oriented. And I really like to have shows or play just where kind of the general public can see it. I love a lot of public art like that you were sharing. And so I think I like to be able to make art that can kind of have some connection to anybody, and they don't have to have a sort of background or preconceived idea or like know of this genre or something. And so, and I had one moment when we had the preview for this show where there was someone with their kiddo who was a young kid who was probably like 7 or something, and they were playing with my piece and pushing it up and down. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, and they were just like standing there playing with it, and then they had a toothpick from the snack table, and they were sticking the toothpick inside the holes. And it was sweet because like their mom or guardian was like, no. But I was just kind of enjoying watching it from afar and being like, it's okay if they drop the toothpick in there. Like, it's fine. It's kind of part of the process. So that's how I think about it. Yeah.
Before Lila goes, I just wanted to add to that. I am not an artist by training in any way, but I feel like I really resonate with what you say, because I feel like a lot of galleries or places make it sort of inaccessible for people who are not trained artists, or that feel like you're it can feel intimidating.
Yeah,
so I think the more accessible the artist can make it, then better.
Yeah, I agree.
I absolutely agree with what you had to say as well, Jess. I also look for things to appeal to a wide range of people, and I think part of that for me is having things not necessarily have a single interpretation, which also gets back to Matt's question about specificity in terms of science. And I think art is a place where you don't necessarily need to have that level of specificity, and somebody can approach something and be able to not really know what it is that they're looking at, and have that be okay, and have it be a spark for curiosity instead of just like, oh, I don't understand it. Or like there doesn't have to be a right answer, and in my work I strive for there not to be a right answer, and for there to be an openness for people who are looking at it to see what they will there.
Okay, I think I'm a little more selfish in my artwork. I think I'm really bad at actually thinking about the audience that it goes towards. I feel like I just get so absorbed when I'm really like in it, that it ends up being more of like an activity for me, and then I'm so appreciative of it being it received well, obviously, and I mean the accessibility I think is a great point. I'm happy if a wide range of people like it, but I also I think it's more it's just fun for me instead of I'm not good at thinking about the audience, but maybe I'll get there.
You know, I have students write about audience and stuff a lot, and because in my grant writing class and other classes, but to be honest, in my actual practice, I just make a ton of work, and then I'm very fortunate to be in a place where I have a lot of fellow SciArt Santa Fe members, I have faculty members and other students. I'm in places and I have the opportunity to show my work a lot. And so to be honest, like when I'm in it making the work, I am not thinking about that at all. I'm thinking about what are my questions and what's my interest in what's really exciting me. And then I take all this work and I kind of have a teacher or a fellow artist look at it and give me feedback, and then that helps me decide what I'm going to show in the show. And then showing the work in the exhibition, I get feedback from people, and that changes my thinking a little bit about how the work is received and how it's understood. So I think it's not that kind of real intentional process for me either, despite asking students to write about it and talk about it. But I think it's an important thing to think about. But there's a feedback, I think, mechanism that happens. Yeah.
Andrea, when you're doing the projection light on the bridge, and it's based on real data, scientific data, and sometimes
real data from sensors.
Sensors.
Yeah.
Right.
Scientific sensors, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's, and the data itself reflects something like pollution in the atmosphere, right,
Mm-hmm.
on the bridge?
Mm-hmm. That was weather, like wind speed and wind direction, because that piece was trying to raise awareness about the potential for wind power. And that piece was powered by custom wind turbines, and it was actually giving power back to the grid. It was powering itself and giving power back to the city. Yeah, and that's another, so let me say in the public art context audience, you have an audience of like the city planners and the people who are funding the public artwork that really give you a lot of feedback throughout the process. But yeah, it's a little bit different because you don't get as much sort of, unless that's built into the process of making it, you don't get a lot of general public feedback until the piece is actually up. You hope maybe that the city planners and the people who are organizing it have that knowledge. So yeah, it's a very complicated question. Thank you, Joe.
I want to take it to you too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good question.
I'm good. It's just, does science have an audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. If scientific papers, if you've looked at them, are insanely technical and very, very specific and almost impenetrable. Even if you're a half an inch from that subdiscipline, usually it's incredibly hard to follow. And a friend of mine who's not a scientist saw one of my papers and she was just like, it looks just like a bunch of footnotes. We do have multiple audiences. It's scientific community, so there's probably the 6 people who actually read my papers. It's quite small. But we also do, for the last 15-ish years or so, we've had to write, actually have been on 10 years, write plain language summaries for everything we do. So almost every scientific journal that you submit to, you have to write a paragraph in normal language.
Why was that initiated, Joe?
I think for the obvious reason that people just find science so inaccessible that they want to have a way that somebody from the general public could look at it.
You could get a general idea of something without having that specific scientific background.
Yeah. It's not me. It's good. So it is a small audience, and also like when I talk to friends who are not scientists, that yes, they're like, oh, I'm a climate scientist. They think like, oh, you're talking about climate change and the polar bears, and if this room is the entire subject of climate change, I'm studying like one little corner of it, and that's something I think about also with art, because as I think Jess mentioned, there's I think there can be a sense that art is very rarefied and very technical, and if you don't know the lingo, then you're not really supposed to approach it. And I think public art is a great way of getting around that, and all the stuff that you guys are doing. And science, I think, has a way to go on that, because the stuff that I do, it's so small and so technical. And so when I explain it to people, it's great bedtime stories. It puts you right to sleep. But it's an interesting question for artists and scientists to talk about that, because I think both have challenges and opportunities when it comes to audience.
I just wanted to, I'm not an artist, and I just wanted to thank all of you for being so articulate about your work in a way that I was actually able to feel connected to it. Because, sometimes when you're not an artist and you see artists, you're like, oh, hell, I'm never going to understand what they're trying to say, So thank you so much for how well you communicated your work.
Thank you. And if there are no further questions?
Can I ask a quick
Oh, yeah.
question of Joe and Lila? Sorry. I was just wondering, and I'm so sorry if I didn't pick this up in the presentation, but can you talk a little bit more about your collaboration? Just because I was, I kind of got to hear, I saw the two different pieces, but I was just wondering more how your two disciplines come together.
First step, yeah.
Yeah, we worked together not as much to create the actual work as you did through Shared Futures. It's a much more of a conceptual sort of back and forth about particularly the individuality of water. Joe's work deals really heavily with stable isotopes, as he mentioned, which is sort of a way of identifying
where water comes from, how it's been processed through the atmosphere.
Right, and so when we are discussing these things, it informs the way that I think about the water in my work, because every time I'm working with a different source of water in my work, that water has an entire history that is embedded in the water itself. Okay. And so those conversations with Joe have shifted that kind of way of thinking about water and the way that I see it as individualized.
Yeah, I think actually some of those quotes from Dogen that I mentioned about all the different ways that water functions, way beyond any of the ways that we normally think about them, that for me as a scientist, those kind of expressions have kind of enabled me to think more broadly about specifically water, but a lot of things in the Earth system. And so when talking to Lila about her work, rather than scrunching at my face and saying, what are you talking about? I get it. And that bridge for me with Buddhism, but also just the way of thinking about water functioning in different ways has been, I think, the foundation of our conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe, I love the way you brought Dogen into it and Soto Zen. And when you're meditating and you're doing facing the wall kind of thing in Zen, right? You feeling the flow. Yes?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, so the flow, is it a liquid thing or is it more like a breath thing?
Great question. It's certainly a breath thing. If you've done any meditation, it's, at least in Japanese Soto Zen Buddhism, it's all about breath and body. But some of these things about like the breath flows, so it's not a dichotomy of, the breath flows, the body flows. And when you spend a lot of time in a retreat, and I've done a couple of like 90-day retreats, this all starts to be just like documentary. This is a direct description of what it's like.
Wow.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, Did you have another?
No, I just.
Okay.
See your face.
I just say join us next week, same time, same place, for another amazing panel. Subscribe to our mailing list if you have not done that, and yeah.
And check out the gallery.
Gallery's open. Yeah.